Well, welcome to Untold, a podcast about Utah's boldest entrepreneurs, business leaders, their behind the scenes battles, breakthroughs, and what the heck were we thinking moments. These are the stories you wish you'd heard sooner about the businesses you might not have known were right next door. So with me today is Ken Huey, CEO of the Hope Group. Welcome, Ken.
Hey, thanks very much. Good to be here, John.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. When I saw the name of your company, the Hope Group, the first thing I thought is, wow, what an incredible name. Hope is such a powerful word, right, that everyone can connect to. So tell me a little bit more about the kind of hope that you provide with the Hope Group.
Yeah, so our company works with adolescents, young adults, and adults with generally pretty significant dysfunction. They're struggling on all kinds of levels. They maybe with even, holding a job, interpersonally, their family relationships, they might be involved in drugs and alcohol, some pieces of each of those perhaps. And particularly on the adolescent side, when you've got a family trying to juggle their child just struggling in monumental ways, unable to complete school and, maintain a friendship, it is a very, very hopeless position. Just like, wow, some of our parents show up actually saying, for the first time, I feel like I know I'm not going to get a knock on my door with a sheriff asking me to come down and identify my child in a body bag. So
Mm,
to hopefully change that trajectory with adolescents, young adults, or adults, so that there's a hope, there's a sense of, wow, we really can move beyond this mental illness stuff, this behavioral issue stuff that we've got going on, and be in a place where there's a future that's pretty bright. We have kids that have started off, with an eating disorder and 2 weeks away from being so malnourished they might die, to being an international attorney and working in China. That's one that
mm.
I connected with here not too long ago for my early career. That's the kind of hope we're trying to provide.
Wow, awesome. That like really hit home with me personally. Like I had, as parents, my wife and I had a child who struggled as an adolescent and was in crisis. And I know that fear that you're talking about, right? That fear of the phone ringing, right?
Yeah.
Of what's gonna happen. And when we were able to get him placed, like it was the first full night's sleep, like that we
Yeah.
had gotten
Yeah.
in months. Um,
Yeah.
I so our experience with navigating the behavioral health system to get our child the help that they needed was not good. Like, that's an understatement. Like, it was confusing. Insurance coverage was difficult. It was really, really hard. I'm curious from your standpoint as a provider, like what are your views just about the process in place? Like, why is it so hard, and what could make it better?
Man, we do have an unfortunately broken system in the United States. I don't like to be a naysayer and be all depressing all the time, but this is just something that is unbelievably broken, unfortunately. And insurance companies want to sell you the idea that they're going to be your means to hope because they want you to buy their product. But at the end of the day, they only make money by collecting enough margin that they stay in business. So they don't pay as much for services as they bring in. And one of the ways that they do that is really by denying services. So there's a real active component to, especially the expensive services of residential treatment and psych hospitalization and those things. They'll do everything they can to keep you from finding that. That's broken. There's no incentive for them to help you find the care that you really need. Now, if they were really long-term thinking and thought, if we get you into this residential treatment and save you 2 months of psychiatric care that's more expensive, we'll save money. But they don't think like that. They just don't. So that's quite broken. You've got that, or you've got the one percenters, or those in the top 5% of the population in terms of income, who can go pay for out of pocket care But that's tough too, because then you've got 95% or better of the population who can't access services. I was in that side of things when I started my career for those that could just write a check. That was one of the things that drove me to the Hope Group, is I wanted to
Mm.
see those that don't have funds, the public pay kids, I wanted to see them get top-notch quality care. And that's really our goal at the Hope Group.
So if the public, yeah, so they get the same experience as the other, the 5% or the
Yeah.
1%. How what kinds of things do you do to try to make that happen for people who, just don't have the resources for that, 1% sort of care?
You bet. So, a couple of things. First, I probably should have said with your previous question that parents that are willing to be pit bulls and fight and claw and scratch to get care using public funds, adoption assistance if your kid's adopted, Medicaid,
Mm.
uh, school district funding and things, they'll cobble together and show up at our doorstep a plate full of potential funding sources that we can help them then sort through. That's a big deal. But we want to also be the driver of that process and go get rates that support top level sophisticated clinical care in a residential setting for instance, Havenwood, which is one of our entities under the Hope Group. So we go do that. We fight with Medicaid and we get a relationship such that they'll give us a rate that works. And what has been phenomenal is that our biggest referral source is actually our payer sources. So school districts and adoption assistants and Medicaid refer almost all of our kids to us because they recognize that we actually are going to do a very, very good job. That's the goal, is to land in that kind of a spot, and for parents to be able to show up and let us help them through the process. But if you're not knowing that, I would say fight. If you're not naturally inclined towards having conflict, you got to flex that muscle and learn how to push against every single window, door, and open something up to get care. The parents with that mindset ultimately find a way to get it funded.
Mm. Yeah, that's really helpful. It and it's interesting that the payers are your biggest referral, or it's a pretty strong vote of confidence in a way,
Yeah.
and it seems to point toward the fact that they probably don't see this as resources that they need to protect. They're as interested in trying to deploy those resources as the parents or as anyone else, but the system just doesn't coordinate. It seems like it doesn't help the connections get made.
Yeah, for sure. That is where we try to stand, is really at a high enough acuity level where we're kind of the last option. We've had adolescents, one young lady we were just talking about yesterday who has been in 32 different placements before she landed with us. Nothing lasted longer than a few weeks or a month. We've had her for 9 months now and she's doing quite well. It's been a difficult slog to get there. But when you're having the success with that level of kid, then they keep coming back to you because they're going to pay for years. If they could pay for a year of our services and have it actually get better, they can see the savings then. There's not quite the
Mm.
fight against it. On our young adult side, that's more private pay and some insurance funding, and that's called Engage. And they come trying to launch and get out of the house. Maybe they have some Asperger's, or well, we don't really use that anymore, but autism spectrum stuff, or just kind of failure to launch. And they come into our facility there, get them into Southern Utah University, help them get a job, whatever their pathway is, but help them learn how to get their legs underneath them and function fully as adults.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. So you kind of started out in one segment of this care system, kind of the upper echelon, and now you're trying to serve the other parts. So what about your early experience, are you most leveraging now as you're doing this work with the Hope Group?
Yeah, so I launched something called KALO in Missouri that ultimately became Embark Behavioral Health. There's a fairly large outfit headquartered in Arizona. Sold my ownership back in 2015, but that that was really focused on the private pay side of things, doing really good, sophisticated work with trauma. And I wanted to do that for a public pay kid. So that's what brought me to where I am today. But even before that, what really did it for me is that I started to understand trauma really in my own life and my attraction to, in terms of wanting to help a particular segment of the client population that was adopted. I'm adopted. There's like 35% of the population in residential care and psychiatric care is adopted, but only 2% of the US population. And I didn't understand that. When I stumbled on my first job in 2002, I started thinking, well, why? Why are these guys needing so much care? And I started to understand trauma and recognize that what I saw as my people weren't getting specialized care. And that shaped my entire career. Basically, I won't go too deep into it, but you can look up aces2high.com, ACES TOOHIGH.com. This is a study that was done that proves conclusively that 10 very specific types of family trauma and sexual abuse and physical abuse and these kinds of traumas, 10 different kinds of traumas, that if you have 4 or more of them, it creates lots of health issues, but lots of psychiatric and social emotional issues. And those that are in care, even if they're not adopted, that's just one of the traumas, they have big numbers of that. I've got a 7 out of the 10, which is pretty high, and was lucky enough to find some of the right interventions at key moments and propelled me in a direction where I land today. I've got a brother that's at Utah State Prison who grew up in the same family a year behind me and did not get that. So, early years, if you can give things that heal that trauma and give hope to a young kid, show them that relationships can be safe, show them how to create safe relationships, they can heal from that and have a productive life. That's what we're trying to create. So that's the full arc. Started when I landed in residential treatment, fresh out of a PhD out of Purdue. I thought, oh, wow, that's what I want to do. Created my own thing, then wanted to go give it to the masses, not just the rich kids.
Wow. So, it sounds like there's a crystal ball, like there's a predictive formula. You can see that people are going to struggle and you're trying to intervene, right? And help people before the inevitable outcome, right? And avoid waste of human potential.
Yeah. So if you've lost a parent to death or divorce or adoption, and let's just name 4 quick ones. Say maybe you were sexually abused, physically abused, and your mother was mentally ill and in and out of psychiatric treatment. Okay, you hit 4 now. Okay. One of those people seem to survive pretty well, but once you hit 4, the predictive value of 4 or more of those lets us know that those people with that kind of a score get STDs 12 times more commonly than the general population. They have more marriages, more divorces, obviously, than too. They're in and out of jail more. They have more tattoos. They have more heart disease. It's unbelievable how the wheels come off. So you really want to resolve that and basically get their brain to calm down and not burn it up. Your limbic system, the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, gets turned on and stays on with 4 or more of these adverse childhood experiences, these ACEs, these traumas. And we're trying to get that fight or flight to calm down and be able to having a resting heart rate of 60 if you're exercising, and not always feel amped up, not believe that every relationship is going to fail, and therefore not have your body and brain bathed in stress hormones that eat it up from the inside.
Wow. Okay. And
that's a
lot. No, that's fantastic. It just seems like it's so nice to hear like things in somewhat definitive terms, like, because it gives hope, right? It gives there's a chance to avoid it, right? So do you see data? Does the data come around full circle to say that we can reduce these probabilities if we can do these things? Then we don't see the outcomes that we do if there's no intervention.
Yes. So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experience Study. 30 years ago is when this came out. It is informing. I went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor here a month ago, and the doctor, they didn't tell me that's what they're doing, but I recognized immediately that they gave me the ACEs quiz. There were 10 questions, and I was like, oh, they want to know my ACEs score to know how prone I am to a lot of different things. It's permeating the medical profession very well, psychological profession very well, But you as a layperson don't know about ACEs, and most don't. But it's that big a deal. It's at the basis of all kinds of the vast majority of our physical and social ailments. It's unbelievable. So we got to do two things. We've got to keep the ACEs from happening, intervene early, help families keep from, sexually abusing and physically abusing, and not having them in environments where, dad's beating mom and mom has a mental illness and somebody's in and out of jail. And we got to stop ACEs and then heal the effects of ACEs. And the great mitigator of these traumas is at least a single relationship with a securely attached adult who can mentor the kid. And I got that, and my brother didn't. And that changed the course of my life. Now, the effects are still there. I mean, I didn't think I could sustain a relationship until my 20s. I knew that I would never have a friend. It was really some weird messaging going on in my head. And I wasn't able to step out of that till I was early 20s. And then I started to have experiences that helped me to challenge that. And my wife could tell you lots of different ways that ACEs have played out in my life. But it's a pretty functional life. Married for a long time, 6 kids. They love us, and I haven't passed it on to them.
Wow. And that concept of passing it on, right? I could completely see how this becomes a cycle, right? In families, right? Where unknowingly, right? I see it in my family where we don't have maybe the same kind of trauma. We start to become our parents at some level, right? And so if your parents exhibit dysfunctional or effects of trauma, I can see how that would echo kind of through the generations. So wow, that's incredible. So you're really helping not just to improve the person who you're treating in front of you, but potentially their family, right? Or their kids.
That's beautiful, and I appreciate you seeing that and saying that. That's so meaningful to me. So as I got married and we had our children, I was panicked. Forrest Gump, meets his child, finds out that he's got a son, and he's so panicked that that child's going to be unintelligent, have a problem like him, and he's so relieved to know that he doesn't. That's how I felt about ACEs, and I just wanted to be a transitional figure that each generation it goes down, but it stops at me, and I'll just hold that crap and do whatever I have to pass on a different future for my kids where they're not walking around with these ACEs. And I feel like I've been successful at that. And if anything else above that is gravy, and I'm grateful that there's some gravy too, but that's the thing for me. That changes generations.
Very cool. Very cool. So, I mean, your passion is clear, like about what you try to do to help people. I'm wondering, shifting and kind of putting on the business hat and the leadership hat for a moment. What is it? What do you need? What did you have to learn to be successful as a CEO of an organization doing this work versus what you were doing as an individual practitioner?
Yeah. So you go from a micro level. Initially, you're really in the weeds as you're building a business, but you ultimately have to get to kind of 35,000 feet and think of strategy and help other people be the caregivers. And so it becomes mentoring others really and creating the right culture. So I find culture to be everything. And I find that what I call the biggest career limiter, a lack of insight, you got to fix that all around you. You got to fix it in yourself. I believe that is the single biggest thing that stops us from being really phenomenal at our jobs, doing well in relationships, but particularly making it in the business side of things. If you can't see where you suck, you are doomed to keep sucking. So you've got to see it on your own, or you have got to be vigilant about asking for feedback from trusted individuals around you who will say the hard shit. You've got to go to them and say, here's what I'm seeing and what am I missing? And you find 2 or 3 people that will tell you tough stuff about you. You grab a hold of them and you don't ever let them go. So I got it. My first big business partner, his name's Landon Kirk, my best friend on the planet. And man, if I ever need to know where I'm messing it up, go ask Landon. He will absolutely tell me. He'll do it nice, but he will tell
Yeah.
you the truth. So on all kinds of different levels, like where am I failing? What is the unspoken thing? Where are people giggling behind my back? I need to
Yeah.
know that so I can fix that stuff. All
Yeah.
of those little teeny things are the things that will create bad culture and will torpedo the business. I have to be working on that. And if I don't, I promise it will fail. And if I get people in seats around me who can't look at that, they can't hear feedback, I'll give them a couple of
Mm.
chances and then I'm going to fire them because that will stop us. We have to listen to feedback.
No, that's great. And I loved how you pointed out one of the things I run into quite a bit in my work is that there's this effect that the CEO can fall prey to, right? Or in this insulating bubble where they, it's not that anybody intends this to happen, but the emperor's new clothes effect starts to come into play where people start telling the CEO what they think that he or she wants to hear.
Yeah.
And you can't just ask for feedback because the feedback you get may not be accurate. You have to you have to do more than that. You do have to mine for it. You do have to identify and provide the kind of safety, right, where people will really step into the danger zone.
Yeah.
Right, and be able to, and because they're taking a risk. Right? They go and tell the CEO, like, man, you suck at this. Like,
Yeah.
there are a lot of CEOs who will react to that. Right. So I love what you said about that kind of the engaged path of seeking feedback, not just asking for it,
Yeah.
but really mining for it and finding the tough stuff, right, and embracing it. Right?
Yeah. So well said. I find that any leadership position, those that are below you, that sort of vertical, takes on the personality of the leader in
Mm-hmm.
great ways and negative ways. And it's the negative things that I'm worried about. Now, as a CEO, my entire organization will take on my personality and my inattention to detail, for instance. If
Yeah.
I don't know that's the case, the only way you fix that is to be aware of the things that suck and be working on them overtly, transparently, so that others don't feel like they get to let that go either. And you don't create an organization that has your weakness baked into it. So I'm never going to be the guy that's an executive assistant to somebody else and I never miss the details. I'm never going to be Rado O'Reilly from what is that?
MASH. Yeah.
MASH. Yeah, MASH. That's just not going to be me, but I need to learn how to flex that muscle so that I can at least make it a C or a B on my skill set
Yeah.
so that I don't imbue that throughout my organization and create weakness from the word go.
Yeah. Or in some cases, like, hire it. You hire for that and you give people that
Yeah.
role. You say, hey, this is what I
Yeah.
need from you. Right. I had one of these experiences where I knew that I needed to provide positive feedback for people. I knew that I needed to celebrate more. People were telling me that, but I wasn't good at it. And every effort that I made at it felt awkward and I felt like I was failing. And I had this insight because there was a guy working for me that was extremely passionate about it. He was the guy saying, "You suck at this. You need to do more." And I finally had that insight of like, what I need to do is unleash this guy.
Yeah.
What I need to do is say, "Hey, here's a budget. Here's, you run this. I'm going to be right behind you. I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do to support this. But I can't be the generator of all of the ideas and energy because you've got the energy, not,
Yeah.
you've got better energy than me. So here, you take it and I'm going to support you."
Boy, I love that. I've thought of it always as sort of buttressing what is weak within ourselves. I haven't thought about it in terms of who you surround yourself, but I do that naturally. My best
Mm-hmm.
friends, the closest people in my life are my opposites, including my former partner Landon, who then always was attentive to the details, but would also speak Ken to people when they were frustrated. He'd say, "Number one, go tell him Number two, here's why he does the things that he does. Here's what he brings to the team. He's not going to bring all of the detail stuff. That's not what you need to bring that, or you need to let me bring it. And he could celebrate me, and that was another way to make that better. That's a great overt way of talking about it. Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Great conversation. So I'm curious, being a CEO, right, and I'm sure doing the work that you do, right, it's emotionally hard. Like it's draining. Like how do you think about taking care of yourself and taking care of people in the organization when they do this kind of work?
Yeah, it's harder the closer you are to it. And at this stage, I'm far enough removed that the pain of the daily stuff is actually not that intense. Now, I still care deeply, and I can hear a sort of profile sheet and admissions set of criteria come, and I can feel some real sadness hearing what somebody's gone through. But that's not so overwhelming to me, but it has been when I've been more in operations. Actually, I've only really been out of the daily operations side for a year and a half, and more kind of corporate and helping those that help.
Yeah.
But I can say that, that self-care is it's huge. People think self-care is escaping or, eating an ice cream or freaking going on a vacation. And that I think that's misplaced. Growing is self-care. And so instead of trying to get away from the feeling of being miserable or sad or burdened, to grow and to read something that helps you understand it better, to listen to a podcast, to go out and get better at delivering care, that's self-care for me. That's what then ultimately heals it. Otherwise, I'm going to burn out and leave. So growth is the cure for depression and sadness in the job.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was just looking at a note I had made on some of your LinkedIn posts. You had said things along this lines of, valuing and prioritizing growth. So feed yourself protein instead of sugar, like feed your brain. So what kind of protein have you been eating lately for your brain, for yourself?
Yeah, Tim Ferriss is a real big one for me lately. Last couple of years, I've been listening to older podcasts, and always every week, whatever I find that is really interesting. But I've recently also gone back to, really because of a push from one of my partners, Josh Gardner, I've been reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People again. So all of any great minds, but we live in the coolest freaking time. If you're the sum product of your 3 closest friends, I can go choose to be best friends with Jeff Bezos and Oprah Winfrey and Bill Gates, and I can talk to them every freaking day. I can listen to a podcast, and the level of inspiration I get from that. I still want to listen to music in my car, but half of my time, as I'm leaving St. George going to Cedar City and I've got an hour in the car, I'm listening to some podcast that inspires me every single time I do it. If it doesn't inspire me within 15 minutes, I shift podcast. That's the amazing time that we live in. That's really, for me, the protein that I'm eating is that kind of stuff that I put in my brain.
Awesome. Good. Well, now, you have another potential protein bar. I've heard about this great podcast that talks about Utah businesses.
Sure.
That you can.
That's right. I've actually, and ever since we started talking, I've watched 3 smaller clips of that, and super excited and thought, wow, it's a fantastic niche. And I'm listening to these guys thinking Jeff Bezos is fantastic for huge macro considerations, but these guys have applicable knowledge that's every bit as good. And just because you're the richest guy in the room, like Jeff Bezos, that doesn't make you the smartest person. It makes you the richest guy in the room. That's it. That is it.
Yeah.
And somebody else that's a CEO, can take you there too.
Absolutely. And I think in some cases, like the differences between that entrepreneur who's uber successful versus the one who's really successful versus the one who's struggling is very small. And a lot of it's luck. A lot of it is, just being in the right place at the right time and those kinds of things. So that's a great, in a nutshell, reason why I started this podcast was because I was hearing stories from, the business people that you would never otherwise hear of,
Yeah.
that were so inspiring, these lessons that people have learned, and let's get them out there in the world. Um,
Yeah.
no, thanks for the plug,
Yeah.
opportunity to to plug.
You you bet.
Um, so I'm curious. So it's clear you've got a really close personal connection to the work that you do. Um, I'd like to understand, like, what would success look like for you? Like, what would winning, right, look like for you, in terms of building a legacy or making a difference?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I love seeing not just the students, the kids, the clients, we call them guests, not just our guests really doing well, increasing the percentage success that we have is a big deal to us. We actually measure that. Who goes out of our system and does not need psychiatric care again, or law enforcement involvement, and what's that percentage? So increasing that percentage matters to me. But what's really happened is that all of my employees are so valuable to me too, and I want to see them succeed. So I get a real kick out of mentoring them. What's my legacy? I hope if somebody at the end, 5 years from now is giving me some award, no, that sounds really arrogant, but forget the award. They're just saying, hey, Ken, you know what? I feel like you were completely present when you would speak to me and gave me the best of your heart that you could give. Oh man, that's it.
Mm.
I really, as corny as it may sound, do believe that the meaning of life on the planet is to align ourselves with love. That
Mm.
how do we eh, create more of that, align with that, connect around loving, caring connections and energy. That's transformative. And so for me, that's the legacy. I very early on in my career, I learned that I was pretty good at making money. Like some people are good at riding a bike well or juggling or something. I just had a knack for seeing a crease and going after it, and turning that into something. And great. But I also figured out pretty early that if I really went after just the money, it had a deleterious effect on me. I kind of turned into a butt. And
Mm.
I watched a particular uncle that was really good at making money, and I didn't like kind of the person that he became. And so I
Yeah.
thought I need to do something that gets outside of me, that creates loving connection, that growth, that helps people do better. And if I make money doing that, I think I can not turn into a butt. And I believe, I hope that that's worked. And that's pretty important to me, that I make money doing something that actually blesses the planet, that doesn't just turn into the latest car. I like to drive a nice car, but that's not it. It's not about the next car that I drive.
That's great. We I've got to chuckle in because we have a kind of a family saying, the initials of it are DBD, and it's basically don't be a D, and yeah, whatever it is that drives you, right, whether it's money or it's ego or whatever it is, right. Whenever we move into that mode, right, we're
Yeah.
not we're not being our best selves, right. We're not, we're
Yeah.
not we're not leaving the mark on other people that we'd like to leave. And you
Yeah.
pointed toward love, use that word love, which can make a lot of people uncomfortable. I know in my corporate years, right? Like you wouldn't throw that word around,
Yeah.
but I think the feeling of it, right? That deep respect, that caring for others, right? Genuine caring for others. I mean, if it's not love, I don't know what it is. But
Yeah.
it's moving your energy in that direction is what I heard you say. Is like that's the true juice, right? That's how you get the good stuff, right? Not the
Yeah.
money or not the prestige or whatever.
Yeah. That
Hmm.
that's the juice. I could not agree with that more. Like, yeah, I've driven some really cool cars. I like cars. and and it is fun. It's like putting on a really nice suit and it just feels really good. But man, it is really not close to my granddaughter Callie saying Pampa and want me to hold her, or my granddaughter Livy wanting to grab my hand to walk outside without even thinking about it, or to have one of my, a frontline staff who's really quite separated from me want to get together and go ride a bike because just wants to hang. That's where the meaning is really created. I don't I I'm not affiliated really with a particular religious tradition. I used to be, but I don't buy that. My faith is actually near death experiences is what shapes it. And in near death experiences, everybody comes out of that pretty much with this feeling that love is the power and the reason for being. And that for me is, if we persist after this life, it's to be in a loving space and to create love before we get there. And that's what we're here for. So that's the thing that I want to create. I want to change lives, make lives better.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Um, so yeah, I'm curious, thinking about your journey, and where you've come so far. If everything goes the way you want, like what would your business and your life look like in 5 years?
Yeah. I think that in the next 5 years, you know, I've got a couple of partners that are getting close to done. One of them's older than me, and so I think we'd need to bring on some sort of an equity partner here soon. And I would want to be the person that transitions through that and helps this what we're doing continue to grow, to have more lives that we're able to help shape, more employees that we can help get great opportunities. But somewhere in about 5, 6 years, probably seven on the outside, that then I'd exit. And I love what I'm doing, so I'd like to have some role where I could be a consultant. I would love to be maybe sort of the interface with private equity and behavioral healthcare and sit on the board and go help companies do better and be able to do
Mm,
that, work really hard and do 30 hours a week, 1 week, and then be gone for the next week and then do 20 hours a week after that so that I'm a part-time resource and can really enjoy being around my grandkids and playing and doing those kinds of things with my kids and my wife too. That's where I'd like to be in 5, 6 years.
awesome. Awesome. I started this podcast. One of the key missions that I had is to provide inspiration for people looking to act on their idea. So when you think about your journey, if there was somebody listening to this that maybe had an idea, they weren't sure what to do, like what advice would you have for them?
Yeah. I I listened to actually Tim Ferriss had a guy, now I can't remember his name. He's a director, and he talked about how people will hand him a business card that says aspiring director. And he's like, "So you don't do anything?" "No, no, I'm an aspiring director." "No, you don't do anything." "Well, I'm an aspiring director." "That means you don't do anything. You aspire to be. Don't aspire to be anything. Freaking do it. Go get a business card written that says director, manifest it, which is fine. That's not
Yeah.
my big point, but do something. You can't dream about it and ever
Mm.
be a CEO. You can't dream about it and create a business. You've got to go at least have a side hustle. Ultimately, you're going to have to just set it all on the table, push your chips out in the middle of the table and go, here we go. And then freaking do it. Or don't, but stop aspiring for crying out loud. Do something.
I love that. Yeah. I'm thinking of the Roosevelt quote about the man in the arena, right, versus the critic. Um, I can't I can't recite it, but it basically says, the person who's got the blood and sweat and dirt and like, all that on them feels like they failed, right? Is really the person that's winning. It's not the
Oh,
person
that's
up in the
cool.
stands
Yeah.
that's talking about, oh, look, they're not making it, or they're not doing it right, or whatever, right? You've got to do it, right? You've got
Yeah.
to get in and give it a go. So
Yeah.
great advice.
I did 6 businesses before I got landed here. I had one or two that one was didn't quite make any money. This was when I was much younger. I had a bungee jumping business. I had a motorhome rental business, jet ski rental business, had a small ad agency. Anyway, that's the other thing is I see a lot of, particularly my engineer friends, that want to just think and consider and strategize and come up with the perfect thing and then launch perfectly. Screw that. Just go do something. Failure is an amazing teacher. Let it be okay. Failure is all right. As long as you stand back up, recalculate, and go again, there's no problem with failure. It's okay.
Fantastic. Great lesson. So I'm curious. So I'd love to, you're starting a podcast.
Yeah.
I'd love to, let's give you a plug here. So tell me about your podcast and where, when's it coming out? Where can people find it?
Yeah. So we'll have our own channel, YouTube channel, LinkedIn. It'll be on Instagram. We've got a website that we're just finishing development and shooting our first episodes this week, 2 of them. And really, it's called The Voice of Hope. And the idea is, who are people in the business world, the therapy world, in the moving people world that are creating hope? And how are they doing it? What creates hope? That's what we're going to talk about.
Awesome. Oh, cool. Yeah, by the time this airs, I'm sure it'll be out, and we can put some links in the show notes. So congratulations.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah. So if anybody's listening and they maybe they've got somebody who's struggling or they're struggling themselves and they wanted to get in touch with the Hope Group, where would you point them?
Yeah, so you can go to hopegrouphealth.com. hopegrouphealth.com, and we've got 6 entities under that umbrella that you can find on the website and click on, and we're just doing a revamp of it, so it's probably a little messy for the next week, but we're just finishing that and we'll launch that. That'll allow you to get to each of the entities: the Havenwood Academy for adolescents, Engage for young adults, Emerge for women 18 to 25 who are struggling with the effects of trauma, led by women in an outpatient setting, Influence Therapy, etc.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So thanks so much for your time today, Ken. This was a real pleasure. And I appreciate your view on hope. It seems very inspirational to me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Really, really enjoyed the experience. You've got great questions and a fantastic product. I love what you're putting out there. Thanks.
Thank you.